All right, I want to tackle the issue today of the question, why does First Fruits of Zion think that we, the Franklin Christian Ministerium, have chosen to publicly oppose their work through the Torah clubs? We know why we've made that choice, and I've made that quite clear in my writings and videos. But why do they think that we have decided to take this stand? And for a long time, I didn't know how to answer that question because we had no insight into it. But Boaz Michael, the founder and director of this organization, has put out a statement on May 13th of 2023. It's a bit old. I didn't know about it until this spring, so that's why I didn't respond to it until recent months. So let's look at the quote, and then I have some response to this quote. It's going to be a short video. He says, we have a Torah club group in Oil City, Pennsylvania, that's now multiplied to 10 different Torah clubs in that area. So you see like a spiritual renewal taking place, which is incredible. But yet the pastors that have 25 people in their church are coming against the work of the Torah Club because it's something that is not in alignment with their historical doctrines of their particular denominations. Fascinating quote. We will dive into it. I will just mention that the group is based in Franklin, not Oil City. There is one in Oil City, but the majority of the groups in our area are based in Franklin. I know people from Franklin and Oil City like to differentiate between the two. I can't expect someone that doesn't live in Pennsylvania to know that distinction, so that's okay. So he thinks that they have a revival going, that small church pastors are opposing them because it's not our particular denomination's teachings. Let's dive in, shall we? So a fellow Christian church leader pointed this out to me. I had no idea that they had responded at all in 2023. We put out our statement in January, in February of 2023 to the local community, put it on our website and whatnot, put it on YouTube and other social media. That it was our effort to warn the Christian community about the unorthodox teachings of their organization. And so I didn't know that they had responded for more than a year. I had heard nothing until I saw this on a podcast. Of course, I don't listen to all their podcasts, so I wouldn't have heard everything they've had to say. So let's point out the things that are interesting in this. Number one, there's an assumption in his statement that numeric success equals spiritual renewal. He said, we've got 10 groups, therefore spiritual renewal. Just because people are participating in something, it doesn't mean that God is, or is not, for that matter, behind that effort. For example, the prosperity gospel, the word of faith movement, the new apostolic reformation, all three of these are growing rapidly in the world today, especially in the global south. Does that mean they're advancing the kingdom of God? Does that mean there's no avenue of criticism for their tactics, their beliefs, their strategies, any of that? We can't say anything because they're growing. Is that the way we do this? Are they proof of spiritual renewal when you have numeric growth? Well, no. Popularity is not a measure of true discipleship. We ought to know this by now. All right? Because a movement is growing does not mean it is a good thing. Because a movement is shrinking does not mean that they have failed. That's not the way this works. That's not the way this works in any realm of life, but it's certainly not the way it works in spiritual matters. Number two, there's a sneering shot, and you can listen to the audio if you want to go back and find that podcast, at the health of churches in Franklin based on numeric valuation again. So it's an insult, right? Pastors of 25 people, but it's not true. Truth be told, the pastors who signed our original statement served churches that range from 25 or so, as he said, to 350, which in Venango County is big. This is a small county. Some of those pastors, like myself, serve as a solo pastor, a senior pastor all by himself on the staff in terms of pastoral ministry. But some of those that sign belong to churches with multiple staff members. Some have one service on Sunday, like us, but others have multiple services, even 3 services on Sunday to accommodate the crowd size. But, and hear this clearly, church size is not proof of faithfulness or unfaithfulness. Church size is not proof of righteousness or unrighteousness. Church size is not proof of God's approval or disapproval. Church size is not an indicator of health. It's not the way that works. It's not the way that has ever worked. For crying out loud, the churches in Germany had a whole lot of people in them during the rise of the Nazis. Those churches were far from healthy, and yet they had plenty of people attending services. You can't just say they don't have a lot of people, so forget about them. That's not the way it works, people. Number 3, the assumption that a pastor, therefore, of a small church doesn't need to be listened to. This is a problem that affects the church in America on many levels. This is a far bigger problem than First Fruits of Zion's attempt to blunt our criticism. Almost all of the popular books, podcasts, YouTube channels, etc. are focused on pastors of megachurches. That is, on quote-unquote successful pastors. Those of us serving faithfully in the, frankly, 98% or so of churches that are under 250 people rarely have our voices heard. The results of this popularity-based leadership have been disastrous, as popular pastor after popular pastor who've been lifted up by publishing and speaking engagements and all of that, then crash and burn one after another, because too many of them lacked either the moral qualifications of pastoral leadership or the wisdom to teach biblically. But they were popular, so people listened to them. They were popular, so people followed them. If a pastor has 9 people in his or her congregation and is speaking God's word prophetically, working within the parameters of the historic and apostolic and biblical orthodoxy of the church, if someone is doing that, that man or woman should be listened to far more than the pastor who has 15,000 people in his or her congregation and best-selling books galore, but is perverting the gospel with materialism or nationalism or any other number of false teachings that will not stand the test of time. Again, I know that pastors of megachurches are listened to, but that's our problem. That's the problem of the church. And of course, Boaz Michael is trying to say, don't listen to that pastor of a small church. I'm a pastor of a small church, just like 98% of the pastors in America or in the history of the church have been pastors of small churches. That doesn't have anything to do with whether or not you should listen to them. And number 4, the assumption that our opposition is based on denominational doctrines. This, my friends, could not be further from the truth. The pastors who signed our document, our initial letter, represent, in no particular order, Anglican, Methodist, Episcopal, non-denominational, Lutheran, Church of God, Presbyterian, and of course, Baptist, churches. There is nothing particular about our united opposition because we represent a broad spectrum of historic Christianity. What does unite us in our opposition is our common defense of the historic gospel, the kind of teaching affirmed by the Nicene Creed or the Apostles' Creed. These are basic truths. This is a basic, fundamental, and historic defense of the gospel. It has nothing to do with the secondary issues that differentiate a Baptist from a Lutheran or a Lutheran from a Methodist, on and on. In fact, the objections we have stated are equally at the heart of Catholic and Orthodox churches as well. They're teachings that precede by 1,000 years the Great Schism and the Reformation by 1,500 years. Why? Well, because we object to First Fruits of Zion based upon the New Testament, where God has preserved the teaching of Jesus and the apostles. Our objection is based on the teachings of Jesus and the apostles. It has nothing to do with our denominational doctrines. He's just trying to dismiss us by throwing that term out there. And of course, I've seen so many times in the comments section on my YouTube channel and other social media that I'm supporting the teachings of men, the traditions of men. Yeah, so are you, because Boaz Michael is as well. Everybody is, because of course, all of our teaching, all of our understanding comes from where we come from. We can't help it. There's no tabula rasa. None of us are a blank slate. That's not the way the human mind works. But any which way, yeah, it's not about our denominational particulars. I have not objected to them based on congregational leadership, based on baptism of adults by immersion, based on separation of church and state, the things that are typically Baptist. None of those things have come up at all, really, in my conversations about First Fruits of Zion. I'm speaking from a place that an Episcopalian, a Methodist, an Anglican, a Presbyterian, a Catholic, an Orthodox Christian all would say, yeah, we see that too. So take note of this. Our objection, our original one that he's responding to, would have been much stronger if we knew in February of 2023 what we know now. I originally wrote this on my blog in April of 2024. Now here in August of 2024, it's even more so. What we knew then was enough to convince us all to reject it. Every single person in our ministerium signed the letter. It was unanimous across all those denominational lines. But if we'd known all of the other things that they are also teaching about the Trinity and other core doctrines, we knew that it was wrong. We didn't have all of the depth of evidence that I have now, so it would have been a much stronger letter. So let's take a step back. The Trinity is not a historic doctrine of our particular denominations. The Trinity is the belief of Jesus' followers since the beginning. The early church wrestled with how to say it, with how to understand it, with how to articulate it, of course. But my goodness, by the Council of Nicaea, it had been settled. For the vast majority of people who claimed Christ as Lord, it was a settled issue. First Fruits of Zion denies the Trinity. Jesus' fulfillment of the law as the ultimate and last sacrifice for humanity's sin is not a historic doctrine of our particular denominations. It is bedrock truth going back to St. Augustine, going back to the early church fathers. And of course, going back to Paul and the writer of Hebrews and the New Testament. The fruit of the Spirit as the test of true discipleship, not the keeping of the law of Moses, is not a historic doctrine of our particular denominations. You can say that all you want, but it's not true. Since the beginning, the followers of Jesus had looked to the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control, and said these are the things we need. Not keeping kosher and the Sabbath and all the host of markers of the law of Moses. That was never the standard. But of course, they want to make it the standard and have declared it to be the standard. And so, yeah, it's not denominational, the reason that we're opposing you. So these teachings of theirs and others like them are what our ancestors in the faith believed. My own context. These teachings, the Trinity, Jesus' fulfillment of the law, the fruit of the Spirit, those and others like them are what our ancestors in the faith believed. It was the gospel that they preached. And it was the truth they were willing to be martyred while believing rather than betray. And many of them were. We didn't unite to oppose you, Boaz, over petty differences, but over the core, the heart, the foundation of the gospel as it has been preached, received, and celebrated for 2,000 years. You are in opposition to that, and that is why we oppose you. We didn't unite to oppose your organization, First Fruits of Zion, to protect our own turf. We did it to protect the sheep that God has given us to shepherd, and the spotless bride of Jesus Christ, his church. So that's an explanation. Apparently, Boaz Michael thinks that small church pastors are opposing him for petty differences because they're jealous that his group is growing. It's ridiculous. We're saddened that sheep are being stolen, that people are being led away from the church that they once loved, that they're being taught things that our ancestors in the faith would have been horrified about, and that sadly they think this is some new truth that God has ordained through Boaz Michael to tell the world that he's a modern day prophet. It's just not so. He doesn't understand why we oppose him at all, which is sad. And it means we're going to continue to have to go down this path as long as they continue this work. Then the opposition to it will continue, because this is the gospel we're defending. Not Baptist distinctives, not Methodist distinctives, please. It's the gospel. Thank you.